Hey YouTube, Trace here, and today in the garden we're going to be working on a few projects in the greenhouse, getting ready for starting seeds and planting up some ordered plants we've got over here behind me. So our first project we're going to work on today is the heated propagation table. We're going to resurface it with a little bit harder material because I keep getting pinholes in my plastic and I don't want my sand to be too moist. And we're also going to top it off with sand because we've lost some over the years. So the way my propagation table works is got basically just a bunch of sand here. It's like a big heat sink. It soaks up heat through the day, and in the nighttime I have buried in here heated cable, and it'll keep my root temperature roughly 50 degrees even when it's 30 degrees out at night. This table allows me to start all of my tomatoes and peppers and plants that you need to transplant in the springtime in the middle of the winter, which keeps me from having to buy them from the store. In order for this to work for me, I've got to have the sand level and touching the bottom of whatever surface my plants are resting on. So like I said, the table's a little bit low on sand, so we're going to add a little bit to it. So I've got just a couple little bags of sand here. But if you're starting from scratch, I'd recommend buying it by the ton. It's much cheaper. And last, I'm going to use this hard sheet, and hopefully this is going to prevent my flimsy greenhouse plastic from getting holes poked in it when I'm flopping seed trays around. So for my potting mix today, I'm going to be using some of my rougher compost. It's not completely finished, but it's good enough, especially for some transplants. And then I've got 2 scoops of vermiculite. I'm going to add 2 scoops of perlite to it. And I will mix all that up really well. The perlite just helps keep the soil really fluffy, and the vermiculite also helps keep the soil fluffy, but it holds water really well. So it's great for potted plants because it helps retain the moisture and it doesn't just evaporate out of the small space you've got, so you can water a little bit less frequently. So first we're going to pot up, these are some Mexican petunias. We got a mail order because we don't have any, but they're great to grow from cuttings. We'll probably show some of that later on in the year. So when it comes to potting up well-established plants that are in good health, there's nothing to it. It's no tricks, just unwrap them. Oh, it was trickier than I thought. Unwrap them, stick them down into your new potting mix. Top them off to the level you want. When I'm planting in pots, I like to leave just a little bit of a lip on the pot. That way when you're watering, you can let that water cool a little and it's not just running out of the pot. It'll soak down into it a little easier. Sometimes if they're a little root bound, this one's not too bad, but you can see the roots kind of swirling. Just pull them apart, loosen them up, break them a little, and that'll help them to spread evenly through the whole pot. That's a little bit better example of one that's a bit root bound, but it's just the same, just kind of fluff it up. Seems like you're tearing the plant up, but you're not going to hurt it a bit. That'll actually help it to grow a little bit better. Alright, so as soon as you get them transplanted into their pots, first thing you need to do is soak them well and make sure their roots are able to establish. So up next we've got some of these holly bushes also shipped in. And on shipped plants, the best thing you can do is transplant them as quick as possible. I've had these a few days. I probably should have done it the first day, but they're well packaged. The plastic keeps them from drying out. But these are a little bit larger pot. They came in a 4-inch pot, so rather than digging down into my new transplant pots I'm putting them in, I'm just going to kind of squeeze the outside, give them a little pull. And these are a little bit root bound, but not too bad. Just kind of tease those a little, and then set them right there in the pot and just top off around them with the soil. And this is the same soil mix I used when starting the Mexican petunias. When I'm starting seeds, I use a little bit different mix, but I'll show you that later on. And because you're filling small voids around the edge of that, you kind of want to shake it, tap it, just kind of make sure that soil works its way all the way around that root ball and you don't have any big air pockets, because when you've got a big air pocket around the roots, those roots will get into the air, they'll just dry up and die and won't be any good for you. When they're real root bound, sometimes you can't just run your finger and fluff them. It's got to kind of tear them a little bit. You can tear those roots. It's not going to kill the plant. It'll actually be better for it. I stumbled across these aluminum scoops the other day at my local hardware store, and I bought a couple, and they're so far my favorite tool I've ever used for transplanting and handling all the potting mix. Just like the others, we've got to water them in real good. Go ahead and mention this tray if you were wondering. These trays are my onions. And usually I like to plant my onions late summer and plant them out into the garden in the fall, but this year my onions were not big enough and were not big enough to plant out in the fall, and I planted them out anyway, but we had an early frost and it just killed them back, so I'm starting again, and hopefully these will make onions in the summer, but they won't be near as big as the fall planted overwintered onions we usually do. So I mentioned that frost earlier, and it also destroyed my water valve I have out here in the greenhouse. It froze and broke because my plastic was damaged at the time. I've since replaced the greenhouse plastic, so it stays much warmer now and won't freeze, but in the meantime I've got to replace this hose valve. So for my hose, I have a piece of poly pipe run underground to my greenhouse, so I've got an adapter to another that goes to my valve, and I just use a clamp to clamp that PVC adapter to my, well, I use a clamp to clamp that PVC coupler to my wall, and that's what my hose is. Simple, but it's effective. I always use a little bit of Teflon tape on these fittings. And some people don't know that there's actually a right and a wrong way to wrap your Teflon tape. So this way is kind of natural if you're right-handed, and that's the way that you want, because you see this tag right here, this tail end, it's loose, and if it's going the other way and you try to screw this on, it'll unscrew. But when it's this way, as you screw your fittings together, it takes that tail and just wraps it right into the threads so you don't lose it. I'll show you one more time. You want to wrap it clockwise, so while you're turning stuff onto it, it wraps that tail on rather than peels it off. And usually hand tight's enough on most of this stuff, but I'll go ahead and throw a wrench on there because I can't get a good handle on this smaller piece, and give it a couple of extra turns to make sure we don't have any leaks when we attach it to our wall. So an important step to this process you don't want to forget is I went to my main water valve and shut it off. Now I'm just going to bleed off any pressure left in the line. And with this poly pipe, it's pretty easy. You just stuff it on, and this is a locking style fitting, so you stuff it past the barb and you rotate the locking coupler over the top of everything. That'll keep it from pulling off, which this one is a little bit worn out, and it's already been over tightened or stripped before because the freeze pushed that whole end off and broke my old coupler. So you're going to cut that off as square as possible, which will give you a nice new piece of hose for those threads to bite into. Alright, give that a shot and see if it works. Alright, looks like we're good. I don't see any leaks. Okay, so my wife doesn't want to be on YouTube, but she did let me do a time lapse of us planting the bulbs. So while I'm not going to walk you through the process, I will show you a little time lapse of us planting bulbs. It's pretty simple. We dig a hole, drop them in, cover them up, and they're good to go. And we also, towards the end, scattered a little bit of wildflower seed over the top and then fertilizer and watered it in. While we grow all our vegetables and everything else organically, a lot of our flowers and hedges and trees and stuff, we'll throw fertilizer on it. It really doesn't bother us any. Well guys, I think that's going to be it for this video. Sorry if it seemed a little bit rushed, but I only had about a 2-hour window to get all that stuff done, and it's supposed to be storming here the next few days, so I don't really want to be trying to film in the rain and the wind. It gets pretty loud out here in the greenhouse. Thanks for watching, and if you happen to know anyone who might be interested in gardening and homestead type content, please share my channel with them. It sure helped me out.